Tupac Assassination, the podcast, rips the curtain away from the 30-year-old investigation of the murder of legendary rap artist Tupac Shakur through the eyes of director of the Tupac Assassination movies and the recent docuseries on Tubi, Tupac Cover-Up, Richard R.J. Bond. Each week, he and co-host Jeffrey Wilson, along with other co-hosts, will explore some facet of how these incredible and beloved documentaries were made, the pain, the healing, and most importantly, the people who were unafraid of telling their truth about what they knew to make that truth public. Welcome to our podcast.
Hey everybody, it's RJ Bond here. I am the director and producer of the Tupac Assassination series and the director of the 6-part docuseries Tupac Cover-Up, which is now playing on Tubi, on Zumo, and most streaming services that you can find. So check it out. With me, as always on the podcast, is Jeff Wilson. Say hello, Jeff.
Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen.
We're going to have an interesting show. Arnie is actually traveling right now, so he can't be with us. He'll be back next week. But how you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing very well, man. Been my rare day off, which I never really actually have because I'm always doing something. But yeah, kind of a catch-up day.
Right. Well, it's good. I myself have been in Las Vegas. I had an occasion yesterday to have lunch with Keith Davis Jr., Keefy D, the accused assassin of Tupac Shakur, currently going to be on trial in Las Vegas in February of next year. Had a chance to talk with him a little bit. He gave me kind of a rundown status of the case and where they're at with things, and he's optimistic about the jury coming back with a not guilty plea on Dwayne Keefy D. Davis. So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So he's doing all right. They're keeping their head up. So it's funny because one of the things that you and I talked about when we started talking about doing a podcast is actually doing a lot of the kind of more behind the scenes stuff and what I would like to call deep cuts, if you will. Yeah. About different things that are going on and that were going on in the world of the assassination movies when we were making them. And so I thought, it's interesting because he himself has talked about it, although his spin on things is wildly different than what the truth was. So, and it is such a deep cut, but it's one of those situations where, we're talking about Reginald Wright Jr., Reggie Wright Jr., who was the now accused person of interest in the killing of Tupac Shakur. He's been named by the Keefy D's attorneys as an alternative theory of liability as to who was responsible for the death of Tupac Shakur. And of course, Reginald Wright Jr., the former head of security for Death Row Records, his name was brought up into it. And so it was interesting to hear that. But more importantly, though, you got to realize
after testifying to get the indictment in the first place.
Right. Yes, he's one of their lead witnesses. He's one of their the prosecution's star witnesses. And I don't know how long that's going to last, but we'll see. So, I want to go back to this is going back to right about when we released the first Tupac assassination movie back in 2007. In a parallel universe, Reginald Wright was doing his own thing. He had basically let Death Row Records fall into complete disarray by that time. Death Row Records was in bankruptcy court, and they were chopping up the assets to give away. And, and it's funny because the internet doesn't keep a lot of these things around. A lot of things stay forever, but some things just fall off the map, especially like if a website goes dormant. The website providers, they just pull all that data down. So you got to be lucky or good because, in my case, I just would screenshot everything, even back in those days, because you just never know when it's going to disappear off the internet. You just can't rely on it being there. Okay. So you try to catch it while you can. In this particular case, I'm going to tell you the story of how Reginald Wright Jr. got tied up in the state of Colorado's, at least at the time, largest tax fraud case and embezzlement case in the state of Colorado's history. Okay,
What
so
years are we talking here?
probably about 2006, 2007 timeframe,
Okay.
stating into that. So what we started to see when we were doing the research for the assassination movie was that Reggie Wright Jr. started to get tangled up in a business that was called True Dat Entertainment. And apparently, what Reggie thought he was going to do was recreate the new Death Row Records. And the big draw to this True Dat Entertainment, it was a record company, not unlike Death Row Records, and it had a roster of a couple of artists that were former Death Row artists. Imagine that, if you will, that jumped ship and left the sinking Titanic of Death Row Records and jumped ship into the lifeboat, which was Reggie Wright and True Dat Entertainment. And I still have the web pages where it basically advertises that Reggie has put himself up as the what was his exact title? Hang on, I'll think about it in just a quick second. It said Reggie Wright was the director of music affairs, the vice president. This is coming off of the website. The vice president of music recordings for True Dat Entertainment, Reggie Wright was responsible for working with Suge Knight and Dr. Dre from '94 until the incarceration of Death Row Records founder Suge Knight in 1996. It says he then became responsible for all the operations of Death Row Records until 2002. Okay, so and then talks about the project. This. He then left Death Row Records shortly after the release of Suge Knight from prison and started working for AMC, which is American Music Corporation, in 2002 till 2004 as the vice president of urban music. In 2004, March 2006, he started working as a special consultant until he was handpicked by True Dat Entertainment owner to operate his company's music division. Sounds pretty heady.
Who was that owner? Do we know?
Well, I'll tell you who the owner was in just a minute. But the True Dat Entertainment was set up to be, it's like a record label. And have you heard of the artist known as The Realist?
I have not.
Okay. The Realist was a Death Row Records artist who had an uncanny vocal resemblance to Tupac Shakur. Sounded just like him. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, The Realist was used by Death Row Records at one point. You can check me on this, and certainly the knuckleheads and the listeners will check me on this. But I think he was used in working on the last Tupac album, doing overdubs or doing something to enhance the album. And if not that, it might have been one of the posthumous albums. But he sounded so much like Tupac that it was really uncanny. He was going to be the main draw for this True Dat Entertainment, and a couple of others were with him. But Reggie was thinking he was going to get the next Tupac, or at least a Tupac sound-alike, and try to revive that whole Death Row thing.
Yeah, that's a bootleg Tupac. No one wants to hear that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Was it what they call that Timu Tupac now or something like that?
Right.
It's discount Tupac. And so he was going to get into that. And even, he did his whole video about this, about his being hired. And he said that the owner of the record label was just throwing money right around left and right. And True Dat Entertainment, they were trying to sponsor fights, professional boxing matches, and sponsor it, like go in full on like Death Row Records and spend that kind of money, throwing around millions of dollars over the course of a year or two. And so Reggie claims to know nothing about the owner of True Dat Entertainment. And of course, the owner of True Dat Entertainment was a gentleman by the name of Hyseer Randall. And he claims to know nothing about anything about any of this or any of this story until way after the fact, until the House of Cards fell. But Hyseer Randall was the owner, and I, by the way, think that's extremely dubious because, number one, we know Reggie Wright's a liar anyway. But I think it's dubious because there's only so much business you can do, and Reggie was supposed to be the vice president of music. I mean, he's the number one guy at True Dat Entertainment and answers only to High Seer Randall, which was the owner of the label. And this High Seer Randall fella, he exploded on the scene and just showed up and suddenly started throwing money around right and left.
Do
And
we have much of any background on him or where he came from?
we
Or just
do.
kind of...
Yeah, we do. And it's going to shock you. And High Seer Randall was there, and he was on the website. He professed to be the self-proclaimed, God dumped money down on him through some smart investing and some good business decisions, and that was the limit of the bio that you got on High Seer Randall. But they were, I mean, when you're talking about serious, they were throwing millions of dollars around, buying all kinds of crap. Okay. And Reggie claims that he doesn't know anything about this at all. Okay? He knows nothing about High Seer Randall, never questioned where all the money came from, never bothered to ask any of that.
I know nothing.
Yes, that's right. Sometimes, yes, it's that the ability to hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, which anybody knows Reggie knows he can't do any of that. So anyway, High Seer Randall burst on the scene. I think they incorporated True Dat Entertainment in July of 2006 is what they were, as an LLC out of Beverly Hills. And took off like a rocket. And they were trying to promote True Dat Entertainment. Of course, nothing ever went anywhere. But flash forward to about 2008 or so, in an apparently unrelated story, the Colorado Department of Revenue arrested a woman, and her name was Michelle Cawthra. And she was kind of a nobody. Nobody knew who she was. And she happened to be a supervisor for the Colorado Department of Revenue in the tax refund section. And according to court documents that were filed when Michelle Cawthra was charged with multiple counts of tax fraud and I want to say embezzlement was another one. We got this guy who's throwing money all over the place. True Dat Entertainment. Reggie Wright's hooked up with them. How this guy, High Seer Randall, knew to contact Reggie Wright's a little bit. That's one of those kind of outlier questions that I want to know. Is kind of like, how did he, who introduced him to Reggie Wright?
Yes.
Because last time I heard, Reggie Wright ran Death of Records into the ground. Okay.
Right.
So if you got an upcoming record label, is Reggie Wright really the guy that you want to have running it? But, and
this is before he got wrapped up in his PCP thing too, right? Or whatever, the stuff in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. This is long before he got, that was probably
Okay.
10 years, a decade. This is going back 2006, 2007.
Gotcha. Just clarifying.
He didn't catch his charges until like 2018, 2017, sometime around there.
Okay. Yeah.
Michelle Cawthra, who was the woman that was working for the Colorado Department of Revenue, she got brought up on, tax fraud and embezzlement and all that. And the reason why was because, and it was part of the court documents, that High Seer Randall, who was the guy throwing around millions of dollars and promoting boxing matches in Vegas and doing the whole death row thing and courting Reggie Wright and spending millions of dollars. He was a mailroom clerk for the Colorado Department of Revenue. This guy worked in the fucking mailroom. And you say, well, wait a minute. That guy worked in the mailroom at the Colorado Department of Revenue. What? And I tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. This mailroom guy must have had some swagger and a hook on the end of his dick or something. I don't know. But whatever it was, he romanced this girl, Michelle Cawthra, even though he was married. He wooed her with his mailroom ways and convinced her to get into an enterprise with him where that she would authorize, as a supervisor, she would authorize tax refund checks made out to him. in an amount to between 500, 1,000, $2,000, sometimes up to $10,000. Okay. And no one was paying any attention to it. Hundreds and hundreds of checks went out, made out to him for these amounts of money, and he or his wife, or funny enough, he and his wife would take them down to the bank and deposit all of these refund checks made out to him at the bank. Now you can imagine if you're the bank guy, and somebody comes in with a tax refund check, okay, then he comes in the next day with 4 tax refund checks.
Again and again and again
and again and again, and his wife comes in, and again, it's all going to the same account.
So wifey was hip to the whole game.
So what? Oh yeah, absolutely. Wifey was knee deep in it.
Okay.
And they would deposit these checks. The bank issued hundreds of suspicious activity reports to the feds, who did nothing about it. And he continued to keep receiving these tax refund checks from the Colorado Department of Revenue to the tune of millions of dollars. And he took that stolen money and decided to become a record label boss.
Interesting.
So, this gets better.
Oh, just getting started.
We just getting started now. So, this guy gets all this money, and of course, he's a mailroom employee from Colorado. He knows nothing about the music industry, knows nothing about the music business, and yet somehow gets hooked up with the likes of a Reggie Wright Jr. Again, how?
Right?
Don't know. And Reggie's a little vague on it in his version of the story. His version of the story was that he met High Sierra Randall, and it was the best 2 years of his life. High Sierra Randall was just throwing money around like he had it, and Reggie just, no questions asked, just took the money and took the claim and tried the position and had a time of his life on this stolen money. So he goes, and High Sierra Randall decides to become a record guy. Now, apparently, he was still doing this while he was working in the mailroom. He would disappear for periods of time, take a vacation day or something like that, and go someplace. But he was doing all of this while he was wooing Michelle Cawthra and receiving all of this money, and wifey was depositing it in the bank account, and nobody was the wiser. Well, apparently, at some point, somebody at the Colorado Department of Revenue found out, and it may have been because the bank called the Department of Revenue. I'm a little sketchy on the details of how it happened, but I have to go read the paperwork. But at any rate, and anybody can look this up. It's online. You just type in Michelle Cawthra. It's Cawthra, I think. Cawthraw, I think. Michelle Cawthra. And then High Sierra Randall is Hysear Randall, Randell. And and there's enough articles about what happened afterwards. But basically, the bank called the Department of Revenue and said, "Hey, you know what? We think there's a bit of a problem. This same guy's come in with like hundreds of refund checks. Who is this guy?" And they're like, "Oh, he's a mailroom guy." And well, who authorized these checks? And of course, they were all authorized by this same Michelle Cawthra. And they, of course, went to her, and she folded like a lawn chair, okay, in exchange for giving information. I think she was charged. I'm not sure if she was convicted. They may have dismissed the charges because she was a cooperating witness. But she rolled over on this High Sierra Randall. And last I knew, I think he was, he was definitely convicted. I have to see. Let me look how long he was. That's not very nice for a podcast to be looking this up on it. 58-year sentence he was sentenced to. And that was in September of 2009. And he was also ordered to pay the $11.8 million.
Wow.
That he embezzled from the state of Colorado in restitution. So, she did it for love, according to her. She did it because she loved him. She did it for him. But yeah, Very crazy case. He may have appealed the case. I'm looking to see if it was an appeal or not. It was.
And there is, for lack of a better term, corroborative evidence that Reggie was involved with this guy and his company, his fraudulent, or was it a fraudulent? Obviously, might have been a real company, but it was done under fraudulent means or created under fraudulent means.
Oh, absolutely. These checks were just made up. She just pulled. And apparently, what it was refunds that were supposed to go to other people, and she just changed the name to him. And so they were kind of wild and crazy amounts. It wasn't like $15,000 exactly. It was $14,899.22 or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but um,
Got a lot of people calling the IRS like, where's the fuck's my refund, man?
yeah. Was they resentenced him, I guess, in 2012. They resentenced, they appealed him, but they definitely did not turn over um, they did not turn over uh, the judgment against him for it. You know, they said in summary, the judgment is vacated to the extent that defendant's 26 convictions for theft by receiving are merged into 5 convictions. So, but again, the judgment is still affirmed, and he's still sitting in prison right now. Heisir Randall in
Yeah,
prison.
I wonder if he has any kind of dirt on Reginald that he could possibly spill and reduce his sentence. I think he would have probably played that hand by now if he had it.
Well, that leads us to you didn't think I was going to tell you that story without having some odd twist at the end of it, did you, Jeff? I mean, really, come on, let's not talk about that. As it would turn out,
Yeah.
there was a nationwide manhunt for Heisir Randall. When Michelle got busted, he found out about it and took off, and he was on the lam, fugitive. And he was eventually picked up in, I think it was in Colorado, and he was picked up. But a very strange thing happened when he was picked up. He was pulled over in I want to say a Ford Bronco. It wasn't OJ's Bronco, but it was a Ford Bronco. And when he got picked up in this Bronco, they searched the vehicle as they would always with, a fugitive or anybody else.
Yeah.
And in the back of this vehicle, inexplicably, no one's been able to give any definition of why. There were several police uniforms and old Las Vegas badges, police badges. Now, when I say old Las Vegas police badges, police departments sometimes, they don't all do it, but some police departments change the style of their badges every like 20, 25 years. And that kind of works as a anti-fraud, anti-forgery type of thing. If you
Yeah.
go down to a pawn shop and you buy a badge, you can buy an LAPD badge, and then you run around badging people saying you're a cop, whatever. As a way to prevent that or deter that, they will change the styles of the badges. And when they found these Las Vegas, Nevada badges, okay, they were older, but they were still closely resembling the ones that they have today. And again, like I said, they found several police uniforms in the back of the male guy's car who was a fugitive, who
Right.
was also tied up with Reggie Wright.
Hmm.
Very weird. Very weird. And they could never account for why there were police badges in the back of this guy's car or why there were cop uniforms in the back of this guy's car.
And what year was this again?
He was picked up. Well, make sure I get the facts right here.
I know it's far removed from the pot case, but still interesting.
Well, these are the kinds of things that people need to understand because obviously, Jeff, this provides a rich tapestry. This isn't a let's go find out whatever somebody did that was dirty kind of thing. That's not the point here. The point here is that you have a guy who completely fumbled the ball with death row records. And yeah, maybe the deck was stacked against him. And I don't think so because a company can generally survive, the loss of its owner or its leader or some president or whatever. And he was certainly in league with Suge, visited Suge 191 times in jail, and still managed to completely destroy Death Row Records. Okay. To where
I'm a
there was
company that
nothing
was
left.
making probably at its apex, whatever it was,
Yeah.
400
Ran it
million.
into the ground. Okay. So he he was indicted in July 26, 2007, and he was arrested May 1st of 2007. That's what it says according to the site here. I'm looking here. Denver police say 40-year-old high school Randall was arrested near I-25 in Colfax for an investigation of theft. He put a $10 million bond on these
Hmm.
guys, and it was Cawthra out, and she was employed for 9 years in the State Department of Revenue. She supervised state accounts, which handle quarterly taxes for Colorado businesses. However, investigators now claim that she funneled more than $5.3 million to her friend. And I'm looking to see if, of the past 24 hours, investigators with the Economic Crimes Unit served at least a dozen search warrants. They've seized passports and passport applications. And there's not a mention in here about the police uniforms, but I'll find it. But that
Really,
was the case.
and it really kind of baits the question, like you said, how did these two link up?
Well,
It
water
wouldn't.
rises to its own level, I hear.
Well, I mean, obviously Reggie's pretty ubiquitous in some of his nefarious businesses, but obviously Reggie's in California. This guy's in Colorado. Where did that nexus? Where did this nexus takes place? Where did the meeting happen? And
I
what
don't
was
know,
his
because
role? What was he doing working with this guy?
right, because ultimately, I mean, Reggie Wright was known for being the guy running Death Row Records, but even by his own admission, by 2002, 2004, he was a has-been. I mean,
Right,
he was the guy who used to run Death Row Records and wasn't
right.
anybody. Now, I understand that Wright used to work a little bit with E1 and with a couple of, companies, and he was kind of what we would call Tupac adjacent, or Tupac catalog adjacent, where there's a lot of talk that he and his buddy John Hyland, and I can't. I've got the paperwork to show that it's true, but they've never been convicted of any of this in a court of law. So I want to put that out there
Sure.
that Reggie and John Hyland were very much in the business of bootlegging copies, unreleased Death Row Records tracks. When money got tight and Death Row Records started to go into receivership, that John Hyland, who was responsible for digitizing the Death Row catalog from analog, which is tapes, to the computer, that suddenly online copies of the Death Row catalog and all of that uh, bootleg unreleased tracks from Tupac and others at Death Row Records were being bootlegged off to the highest bidder on the internet.
Unmastered stuff, right?
Yeah, yep, just raw acapellas and all that. And Bomb First was the name of the bootlegging group that did that, and John Hyland was very much involved with it. And thank goodness that guys like J Mix and other people, they kind of followed my lead and, ultimately took screenshots of all of this because none of this is around anymore. But these guys were so brazen in their putting out the Death Row Record stuff that they were actually publicizing screenshots of the actual computer file folder systems, Death Row server, and the
Wow.
folders where these acapellas and everything were, to prove that that's where they were coming from. That's how brazen this was.
Wow.
And again, I don't know that Reggie had anything to do with the bootlegging, but I can tell you, I wouldn't understand how he wouldn't be
I was gonna say, how could he not have?
with
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and again, like I said, they've never been convicted of anything in a court of law. We do have the plenty of documented evidence, and of course, if you wanted to reach out to RJ Bond, what I know at outlook.com. Again, RJ Bond, what I know at outlook.com. You can actually send me, and I'll send you the docs, man. If you don't want to believe it, I've got the receipts. And John, you know that. You know I don't come to the table without the receipts.
Mhm.
So it's the way you stay out of court and stop getting sued. So anyway, the interesting part about it, again, like I said, is that, Reggie really thought that he was going to be, he had found another Suge Knight,
Right.
and they were going to start this new Death Row Records called True Dead Entertainment with Discount Tupac in it,
Bootleg Pac.
Discount Suge Knight, and come to find out that this guy, was caught on the lam with a bunch of police uniforms. So very interesting
And
side
yeah.
note, but to say that there are some people that just find trouble where trouble just kind of like flies on shit, just kind of
Yeah.
gravitates the flies just kind of he's the shit that the flies gravitate to.
Right.
It's interesting that somehow this guy thought that Reggie Wright Jr. was going to be the guy to take him to the next level with his record label, and Reggie just falling for it. And that's why I don't understand, after everything that went on with the death row bankruptcy, this guy's supposed to be a former Compton cop. He's supposed to be this guy. He thinks he's so smart, puts himself out as the label boss, giving advice to people in his new book about what to do and what not to do. Yeah, how about not getting involved with tax evaders and tax embezzlers is probably a good idea. But it's interesting to me. Like I said, they're just some people that just find themselves into trouble and, get themselves into all these toxic situations. And I can't understand why. And that's why I say he had to have known something about it, because how could you not? How could this guy be spending all this money
Yeah.
and not be involved with that? Now, I can tell you that Frank even fell into a trap similar to this. Fortunately, we didn't get involved. I didn't want to get involved, so we kind of got out of it. But there was a time right after we had released Tupac Assassination that Frank, who was always looking for, that big opportunity to come based on his book and based on the stuff that we'd done. And he was just always looking for that big, that grand slam hit. No, aren't we all? I mean, nothing wrong with that. And when we went to Vegas one weekend, because Frank had found a guy who was really interested and wanted to meet Frank, and he wanted to do something like invest in a documentary. And we were getting ready to do Assassination-THE, and we were looking for see if somebody wanted to put up some money to do it right. And lo and behold, we went to Vegas, and Frank. I said, "How do you know this guy?" Frank, he said, "I don't know this guy. He wanted to meet me, invite us to Vegas to go hang out with him in his hotel room. He owns a gold mine." And I was like, "Huh?"
And just for context, RJ, just for new listeners who might be brand spanking new, Frank Alexander is
Well, he was Tupac's bodyguard when the
yeah,
night that Tupac got killed. And anybody knows, the assassination movies, Frank Alexander was a major part of all of that. So,
just for the record.
yeah, that's okay. Nothing wrong with clarity. So Frank decided that this guy came to him and he claimed to own a gold mine. And Frank was like, "Hey, RJ, you want to go to Vegas with me? We're going to do that." Now, Frank hated Vegas. That's why he asked me to go, because he hates Vegas, and for obvious reasons.
Right.
And didn't want to go, but he kept saying, "Hey, this guy owns a gold mine." I mean, now come on, there's a lot of people that make claims to a lot of things
Right.
that you have in your
Right.
lifetime, but you got to admit, oh yeah, I own a gold mine. That's a huge claim.
Yeah.
Okay, no pun intended. Um, that's a
If I had
huge.
a dollar, the old I own a gold mine trick. All right.
Right, exactly. That's right. I want to invest in your movie. I own a gold mine. Okay. Well, never saw the gold mine. The guy turned out to be a fraud. Didn't have any money at all. He was living off of he went up and he had this beautiful big penthouse up in like MGM or one of the hotels up there. I think it was actually the Wynn. And beautiful penthouse room with the multi-floor hotel room and all that, and people everywhere, girls all over the place, everything like that. The entire time we were to meet with him, because Frank set up a meeting with him to come up there and talk about helping us out and doing the movie and all that. And this guy did nothing but just sit there and eat his room service. He just sat there and ate the whole time, and it drove me nuts because it just seemed to be really inappropriate. I was there for a business meeting, and
Right.
this guy's eating, in the middle of Party Central, and he's eating some food, and he's kind of talking to us, kind of halfway talking to us. Didn't seem particularly interested, other than the fact that he wanted to meet Frank. And I think that was just some celebrity clout chasing, that meeting Frank
Mm,
thing, and he thought Frank was a cool dude to meet, and so he said that. And we got there, and of course, I was 5 minutes in. The party scene wasn't my thing anyway, and we ended up getting into a conversation with the guy. I thought the guy was disrespectful, so it never got past that. But fast forward several weeks later, I he was talking to Frank. I'm like, whatever happened to that dude? Said he owned a gold mine. You ever see it? No, no, no. He didn't have no damn
hmm.
gold mine. He didn't have a gold mine. I said, well, that's a pretty ballsy claim to make, because the first thing I would be is like, where is it?
Right.
Where's your gold mine? Maybe an abandoned gold mine, but that was the thing. I mean, so in everybody's defense, Reggie's looking for that big hit. Frank's looking for that big hit. Everybody's looking for the big get, the big score, you know,
Absolutely.
and trying to be that guy. Everybody wants to be. But the reality is that even in the case of a Suge Knight, I mean, he worked as a bodyguard for Bobby Brown. That was how he kind of got into the whole music business. And he worked. He didn't just expect somebody to hand something to him. He worked for it. And the age old saying, if you want something, you got to work for it. There's no quick fix.
No.
There's no quick fix for it. But I thought that the story of how you say Reggie Wright's name, Reggie Wright got tied up, and I think his name's even mentioned a couple of times in the investigation stuff. But it also makes you wonder, after our knowledge that we've learned recently about Mr. Wright's penchant for wanting to talk to the police about things, that either the actual information about him or how he was spending it, because if he was giving it to Reggie Wright to spend on, or Reggie Wright was spending it for him, I think the police would definitely be talking to him about what it was spent on, right? Wasn't a
Mm.
charity. And but I can't help but think, and again, not to dirty up anybody's name, but to be able to say, listen, this is not the first time that a particular person of interest in the Tupac case was also not tied up in another scandal, which is what it was. It was the biggest embezzlement, I think, in the Colorado's history, and how Reggie Wright's name somehow tied up in that. So it was definitely worth
Well,
reading
and the
about.
main culprits involved are, you know,
In jail.
incarcerated, and he's
Well, yeah,
not.
they're in jail. I mean, they're in jail now. I think that the Michelle Cawthra, I think she got a pass because she turned over on Heiser Randall. But like I said, what is he doing with badges, police badges in his car? What's he
Well, I
doing
mean,
with
it
police
reminds me of
uniforms in his car?
even the drug case. He was sentenced to several decades and did 18 months or whatever. I'm not saying we know he was a Fed or is a Fed or whatever it is. But my point was, when I said that, he is involved in some illegal stuff and everybody else is going to jail, but he's not.
But
He's
he's
still
not.
free.
That was exactly. And thank you for bringing that point up, because that was the point I was missing, that I was trying to remember what it was. What the hell was I trying to bring? But yeah, you're absolutely right. Here yet is another case where there's all of this scandal, and I last time I knew, there were things called accessories after the fact,
Right.
and you're helping spend the money. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the theory of liability about Keefe D the theory that if you're the guy who holds the door open for the bank robber, you're just as guilty as the bank robber?
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you're dealing with stolen money and you're spending stolen money and you're out there, you'd have to have a pretty provable claim of non, like, you never asked this guy where he got his money from, and you
Right.
believed him when he said he had a gold mine. Okay, or that he was actually harvesting cloud juice, and he was selling cloud juice, and he got the patent on the harvesting cloud juice machine, and that's
And
where he
and if
got
for
all his
whatever
money.
reason, he did get leaned on and said, "Hey, I got some juice on Reggie.
Yeah,
Spare me X amount of years." They're like, "We don't care. Reggie's working for us. We were after you in the first place."
Well, yeah, and I'm guessing the Colorado Department of Revenue. I mean, because you're also dealing with. I mean, I'll have to look to see if there were federal charges filed against High Sierra or not. I think it was all done at the state level because again, it was state tax. But you're dealing with also a lot of banking laws, federal banking laws that were
Right.
also violated. You know.
Some wire fraud, I'm sure they could throw in there if they
Yeah,
really wanted to get
absolutely.
extracurricular
Yeah.
with it.
But here
Interesting.
he is. Somebody else goes to jail, and Reggie's got a story.
Right.
That I mean, think about it. How many times has that
I,
played out?
I know.
How
I mean,
many
not to
times
go
has
too deep
somebody
in
else
this
gone to
rabbit.
jail?
This
Yeah.
is just the stuff we know about. I mean,
Right.
when we go down the rabbit hole of Kevin Gaines and Rampart and all this other shit, this is some of the stuff that we just know about. Is the stuff we can you imagine what we don't know about that these guys were up to?
Right.
Like this stuff with Reggie, we're just hearing about like this case in Colorado or the case in Tennessee or whatever he was up to in Compton and death row being investigated by the FBI and the DEA and the AT. I mean, this is just the stuff we know about.
Right. And again, like I said, this is a story. You can go to Bomb First, his website, and you can hear him tell his side of the event. It's not like he doesn't pretend that these things didn't happen. It's just and I will say it so that they
Hmm.
don't think I'm just being one-sided about it. He has claimed that he knew nothing about where the money came from, that he was just as surprised as everybody else, but was happy to take the money that was being thrown at him and ask no questions as to where the money came from. Which, by the way, that's kind of a pretty egregious thing all by itself. Okay. You're going to get millions of dollars rained down on you, and you're not going to ask where the money came from? Really?
Right. Right.
You don't know? Especially if you're supposed to be this smart business guy, because obviously he would have been trying to broker contracts with people. He would have been trying to get record deals for people. He would have been in all of this. So to hear the guy didn't tell him anything, he didn't know anything, then what the hell were you doing at the record label if you didn't know where the money was coming from or how you were going to pay
Mm.
people? You know,
And how
that's
it started. Well, I mean, again, I would just be anxious to drill down on how those two popped up on each other's radar.
right. Yeah, it's a great story, isn't it? Have no idea.
Right.
And of course, maybe in that break, that narrative break right there lies why Reggie Wright wasn't indicted, wasn't part of the conspiracy to, defraud. He had obviously she had her hands on it. He had his hands on it. The wife had her hands on it. Went into the bank. Who he spent it on? I mean, obviously you can't. If he spent it on a taxi cab driver, you can't indict the taxi cab driver
Right.
for
Right.
being part of it. And that may have been how they looked at it. But when you're talking about Reggie admitting that they were spending millions of dollars, okay, that could very well be, and we don't know. We don't know what discussions were had. We don't know what level of involvement people have with
Well,
each
it's
other.
pretty safe to assume that True Dat was started with this money.
Hmm.
And if Reggie was working for him, I mean, I'm sure he had to have some idea where it was coming from. And like you said, enter accessory to
Yeah,
fraud.
yeah, accessory after the fact. That's right. So it is very interesting, and of course, as we always say in the assassination world, these are deep cuts because again, I learned about all of this back in 2006, 2007 while we were doing the assassination movies. So when you look at context and you
Mm.
say, well, there's all this question at the time about whether or not cops were involved with the shooting at the shooting in LA at the Biggie shooting, or whether who was involved or were there cops involved. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't with the Tupac shooting. One extension of that as you try to think these things through with critical thinking is, well, could they maybe they weren't cops, maybe they were dressed as cops. What you saw as an LAPD uniform may not have been an LAPD guy. Who you see as in a Vegas uniform may not be a Vegas guy. He may be a guy with an older but still usable looking badge that would fool most consumers. Wouldn't fool the police, but would fool most people. Okay.
Mm.
Maybe he was using people dressed up in uniforms for security, you know? So there's
Very
a lot.
plausible. I mean, yeah, and that's, I mean, for whatever reason, just in my mind, as you said that, I'm thinking of JFK. There were so
Yeah.
many people who identified themselves as Secret Service when, in fact, there were only just a handful who were actually there in the motorcade, where all these other guys around were saying, "Yeah, I'm Secret Service," with badges. So it's a
Right.
very interesting thought to think about that.
Yeah, and again, when you've got the guy who, and this is context, when you're talking about a guy who is allegedly conceived as a guy who was orchestrating a shooting in Las Vegas and or LA or both,
Hmm.
and he's orchestrating this, he's planning all this, he wanted to be a label boss and all of these things, a story like this suddenly falls in your lap, and it kind of corroborates a lot of, oh, so Reggie Wright wanted to run Death Row Records. Well, how do you know that? How do you know he wanted to do that? Well, he was given the opportunity to do that, but even after he was done, what was the first thing he did? He went out to try to start his own record labels with American
Right.
Music Corporation first. They threw him out, and then he started this True That Entertainment. So he's tried over and over again to recreate that lightning in a bottle that was
Right.
Death Row Records. And so you say, then when Phil Carson comes back and says, make no mistake about it, if Phil Carson was the FBI agent working the case again of the Tupac shooting and the Biggie shooting, and Phil Carson says that Reggie Wright made no mistake about the fact that he wanted to own and run Death Row Records. Make no
Yes.
mistake about that. Well, then suddenly you realize that, because what did he do when he stopped running Death Row Records? He went out and tried to start and run another Death Row Records
Right.
a couple times. And, of course, being who he is, the failure rate is excessive. But, and he tried, failed, and tried and failed, and tried and failed. So I think that these kinds of things, and you say, well, gee, RJ, why are you so hard on him? Why do you think it? Well, when you get stories like this, you hear stories like this, it certainly doesn't make your belief about what a person's capable of doing, any less strong.
No,
That's for
and I think that's important. Again, it is somewhat circumstantial, if you will, but you're indicating, a certain pattern of behavior. Yes, his allegiance with this guy with True Dat was 10 years after the Biggie or the Pac thing, but still, this is
right.
how he rolls. And then years later down the line, you got the PCP thing. So his
Yeah,
proclivity towards criminality is apparent.
yeah. He seems, like I said, he seems to be gravitated like a magnet. But what's interesting is that, and bad actors, he's a magnet to bad actors. And again, if you're a person of decent morals and decent, proclivities, you're not going to be attracted to those kind of people. Those
Right.
people that you're almost a repellent to those kind of people. You do good things,
Right.
you're a good, upstanding person. You're a repellent to scoundrels, to people that want to get over, that want to do things. And I think that's another important thing to do. Again, we're not saying, and I want to make it very clear on our podcast, that we are not saying that Reggie Wright was directly involved with anything to do with High Seer Randall, the Colorado embezzlement, any of that. We know he was a direct beneficiary of all of that money, and we find it strange that he never bothered to question where it came from.
Right.
But maybe some people don't. But that's one of those deep cut stories that gets left on the floor,
Hmm.
but is always part of an analysis. So it's like when you look at who might have robbed a bank, and you go back and you see that somebody tried to rob a bank 18 times and failed, and then there's a bank robbery, where do they look? They look for the guy that tried 18 times and failed. He
Right.
might be the first suspect because he's tried it so many times, and this time maybe he got it right. And that goes back to that old police saying that they always say, oh, officer, I got pulled over for a speeding ticket. Don't give me a ticket because this is the first time I've ever sped. And the officer says, no, it's the
Hmm.
first time you ever got caught speeding.
Right. Right.
Okay. You've been doing it for a long time. Lord knows how much. This is the first time you got caught. So,
Right.
as it applies to the drug case, as it applies to the money laundering, as it applies to the failure of a security force and two people getting killed because of security failures, to possible involvement in those and orchestrating those, the pattern of judgment is really bad, really bad. And
Yeah,
those
and,
are the
and and
things you look at, and you're on the right track when you're saying, okay, well then it's not without the realm of possibility
right.
that this cat may or may not have done XYZ,
Right.
because look at what he's into.
And nothing conclusive, nothing definitive, like
Nope.
I always say about anything when I do the Conspiracy Farm show. I'm not saying what it is or isn't. I'm just saying my considerations suggest XYZ. Through the
Right.
preponderance of certain evidence, my
Yep.
considerations suggest this. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. And I would love to eat crow and to say I'm wrong. I have an opinion. My opinion doesn't have me. But through the preponderance of this evidence and seeing a certain pattern of behavior, like you said, I'm tending to lean towards. Like I said, I want to know how these two hooked up. We'll never find
Yeah.
that out. But like you said,
Nope.
how these guys how he tends to gravitate towards these people. And again, a lot of these people go to jail or wind up
Well,
dead, and yet
maybe
he's
we should try
sitting
to
free
maybe
doing a
maybe we
podcast.
maybe we should try to reach out to the guy. Maybe we should try to call Heisey Randall in jail and talk to him and see if he's willing to talk about how they met.
That'd be
Maybe
an awesome
work that
phone
out.
call. Let's do that.
That'd be great. Let's try to
Try to
do
track
that.
that down.
Absolutely.
And
So,
again, it could be, we could just be pulling that shit out of pepper, RJ. It could be just some happenstantial thing. This guy was doing his criminal, crazy stuff, happened to like hip hop. Like, hey, let me reach out to Reggie. He's a failed whatever he thought he was. He's like, let me just toss some money around Reggie. Maybe he'll like me, maybe he won't. And then the adventures ensued. Who knows? It could have been as benign as that, but
well, Reggie said he threw millions of dollars at him. It was the best 2 years of his life.
right.
And it's like, okay, well, I get that. Maybe everybody likes to be the one whose money is showered upon. But I don't know. I would think most people
And we
would
see
kind of
that.
start wondering where it came from.
People love that kind of flex. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
say, I was hanging out with Reggie Wright. I took pictures. Some people are just on that kind of superficial level just for that alone. But I'm thinking there's something a little bit more to it myself.
Well, I mean, again, like I said, maybe it stops there at the end with with those two and Cawthra and Icer Randall and all that. But again, like I said, they're trying to apply a theory right now to Keefe D, which says that if you're the guy who held the door open for the bank robber, if you're the guy that drove the getaway car, if you're a guy who did anything to enable
Right.
those crimes, and enabling those crimes could be, hey, we're out of money, you need to go get more. And he goes back into well and he goes and gets more because the pressure's been put on him that they need more money for this, that, or the whatever. I think there's a very fine line, very blurred line between a recipient and a participant. Okay,
Well,
you can
again,
be a
going back,
beneficiary, but you
like
could
you
also
said,
be a participant.
the accessory laws. There are, accessories to these kind of crimes where you receive just as much penalty as the person who directly did it. So
Yep.
definitely worth drilling down on. Yeah, let's try to see if we can reach out to the young man, or probably not the young man anymore. Just reach out to him, see if we can get to
Yeah.
the bottom of this. Again, it could be nothing. Could be
Yep.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So anyway, like I always say to the knuckleheads, do your homework, check it out, go back and read the articles. They're all out there. Now, the stuff with Heisey Randall and TrueDat and all that, the TrueDat website, of course, went down a long time ago. It may still be in the Wayback Machine. If you go to I don't know if people know about the Wayback Machine. That's actually
Hmm.
a website where you can put in an old dead website, and what they do is they take backups of all these websites over the years. So if you type in TrueDat Entertainment or TrueDat dash or TrueDat True dash dat dash ent or something like that .com, and you put that website in there, it'll tell you, hey, we don't have anything current because the website's been dead for 10 years, but we've got something from 2009 that's a copy of the website. Now, all the pictures may not work, but the website's there. And you can go back and you can look at old websites and you can look at old postings. So it's never really ever forgotten. But it's called the Wayback Machine, and you can do that with any web page. You can put the web page in there, and it'll give you a list of all the times that they've backed it up. And you could just click on any one of those times they backed it up, and they'll present the website for you. So TrueDat Entertainment, the website's out there. It's on the Wayback Machine, but you too can look it up, and you can see how Reggie was tied up in that company as one of the big leaders of the company. I don't know, he's a COO or vice president of music affairs or whatever label he gave himself. He was running the company. Heisey Randall didn't know anything about running the company, and so therefore bank accounts had to be set up, money had to be done.
Hmm.
So there had to have been some level of participation in some degree. I can't obviously, it's all speculation right now,
For
but
sure. But, again, the interesting tidbit to all of it is Mr. Randall sitting in jail while
yeah,
Mr. Wright, who did business with him, is free as a bird.
yep,
Another
exactly.
pattern of behavior worth
Yep.
looking into.
Yeah. So that is our deep cut for today. on our amazing Tupac Assassination podcast. Again, we'll be back with Arnie in studio next week, and I'm hoping he'll drag a guest along with him. He's told me he's made some calls, and he'll be able to get some other people involved, and we'll have a broader tapestry. I will want to just give a big shout out too to Gene Deal while we're talking. Gene Deal was was Biggie's bodyguard, one of them, working security that night at the Peterson Auto Museum when Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, was killed. And he was there. He witnessed it. He went through several photo lineups and identified people that he believed were involved in the shooting. And there's much been made of that. But Gene Deal was, to my surprise, clearly to Jeff's surprise, everybody's surprise, he started talking about this show that he had seen called Tupac Cover Up. And he went bananas in his praise of it. It's really just a great observation. Jeff, it's funny. After that happened, I was getting text by some people that I hadn't talked to them in years, and they were texting me right after the Gene Deal show, maybe within an hour or so, saying, "Hey, I'm watching your Tupac cover up right now, RJ. Great show." So yeah, I mean, clearly, Gene's got reach. The positive things are coming.
Well, it was really cool in that not only did he put your show over and we're really raved about it and just, was saying how awesome it was, but you were able to call in and you guys actually had a conversation. And at first, Gene was just like, man, you got to see it. And you're like, dude, this is the director, RJ Bond. And so it was really cool for you guys to have that conversation.
Yeah, it was. It was fun. He was definitely surprised. And when it was over, when I'd hung up the phone, I had turned the volume of the podcast or the live stream down.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking on the phone, you get that echo effect. And but after I was done off the phone, I hung up the phone. There's about a 1.5 2-second delay between when something's happening and when it's broadcast on YouTube. And so I turned it down and I told my wife, turn up the volume because I want to hear what he has to say about it now that I'm off the phone. You usually can catch what if they roll their eyes or whatever they do if they don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, that was RJ Vaughn, and he rolls his eyes. No, he got off the phone and he goes, God, that was the director, and he called me. And I was like, okay, that was nice.
He was fired up, man. It was really cool. I mean, again, I told you off air, and people even have echoed the sentiment. If you two could get together to do some Pac big cover up Nexus, just dynamic duo, again, you two are the last of the Mohicans with the kind of insight and degree of separation to these events. You two are the last ones, man, and especially who are in such hot pursuit of the truth in these things. You guys are it, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think the pool is getting shallower as it goes. The
Without a doubt,
dying off all over the place, but we're still out there. We're still hanging out. I'm actively right now. What I'm doing, if just out of curiosity, because people always wonder, what do you do during your day? How do you spend your day, and all this kind of stuff. I actually have when I got, and a lot of you may not know this, but Russ Poole's estate turned over his personal notes, videotapes, files, audio tapes.
And for our new listeners, Russell Poole.
Yes, we're new listeners. That's right. We're on the third episode. Russ Poole was the detective that worked the Christopher Wallace homicide, which is Biggie Smalls shooting in '97, and was known for being the detective that linked the Tupac and the Biggie killings and put a lot of the same players in the room and made a very big impact on the investigations. Many believe he solved that crime, Russ Poole. Russ Poole died not long ago, but several years ago. He died of a heart attack, unfortunately, and the world was, really lost a real soldier that day. And he was a personal friend of mine. And so his estate called me up one fine day and said, hey, listen, we have all of these investigative things, boxes of investigative things of Russ's. We can't think of anybody better to offer to give them to than you. And that was, after the tears were over,
That's heavy, man.
I headed out to the middle of the Palm Springs area where his mother and sister lived, and sure enough, here were these boxes, and I spent hours going through the boxes and forklifting stuff, and all kinds of craziness. And one of the things that I got was I had Russell Poole's business card
Mm.
holder, binder, if you will, and from back when he was not only on the police department but afterwards. And there are so many different police agencies. I mean, I'm looking at Chuck Phillips' business card right now. Chuck
Hmm.
Phillips he's deceased. He was the writer for the Los Angeles Times that worked on a lot of death row records articles and that. So, I'm looking at his business card right here. But I'm looking at different uh, LA County sheriffs and telephone numbers that are written on the back. And so I'm going through here and I'm trying to find out who still has active telephone numbers on here, and what they might be able to add to why was Russ calling these people? Who were
Mm.
they that Russell was interested in, and what might they have to share about these things years later? So that's what I've been kind of working on. I've been poking at that. I mean, there's a lot of, so I like the blast from the past. It's like a time capsule.
Hmm.
You know, here's a business card from Frank Liga, Detective Frank
Oh,
Liga,
wow.
Narcotics Division, clandestine lab investigation. We got
Frank Liga, the one who shot Kevin
shot
Gaines
Kevin
about a week
Gaines.
after the Biggie killing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because on a lot of these business cards, he's got different he's got different uh, telephone numbers on the back that he hand wrote down. So, we what we're doing is we're just taking a card at a time and kind of poking, calling numbers to see if any of them are still good. A couple of
Wow.
them we've done, left some messages, and then ask, what was your relationship with Russ? What was he talking to you about in that? So, kind of
Hmm.
cool,
Wow. Yeah,
kind of
that
fun,
is cool, man.
kind of cool.
That's
You never know where your next lead's going to come from.
exactly.
Police officer Cliff Armus business card is in here. All the Randall Sullivan's business card is in here. Just crazy, crazy stuff.
Wow.
But the work is never ending. That's for sure.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
pursuit is relentless, and the work is never ending. That's for sure.
Well, you've been on top of it, man, and I'm speaking for myself, but I can't thank you enough for all the work you do, and even the limited conversations I do text with Gene. I tell him, man, I thank you so so very much for what you guys do. Just as a not only just as a Tupac fan or a Biggie fan, from like just human beings, man. It's just like these guys lose their life over some bullshit, and then we get given this horseshit narrative about what happens, which is just an insult to our intelligence. So I think it's just cool that you guys have continued to drill down on what we hope to be is the truth we can get someday.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, again, and people ask all the time, well, RJ, why are you working with with Keefe D? He did it, all right? He did it. Well, Tupac cover up is all about why he probably didn't do it. But the reality, and I'll say this again, and I think it's important we just say it every episode or every time we do the podcast. Unless you get rid of the false narratives, sometimes the noise that the false narratives create drowns out any other truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing you got to do sometimes in an investigation is you almost have to just clear the weeds of the. It's just like with the JFK assassination. If you're going to believe anything other than Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself, you're going to have to discount that and take the air out of it so that other narratives or other possibilities can exist. And in
And
the
it gets into
Tupac
what
case,
you brought up before. People just have that intransigent confirmation bias, which
right?
disallows them from entertaining any other possible alternative possibility.
Yep, absolutely. And so we try to do what we can to say, okay, if this is supposed to be justice and not blame, then we need to make sure that the
Right.
people that made up this crazy narrative that they're discounted, that they're put to shame as far as, the fact that they made this up in the first place. Why would you even do that? And then, then maybe then other narratives, other theories, other possibilities may have life of their own, and then we can get down to try to figure out what happened. But
For
it won't
sure.
happen unless there's this narrative that's hanging out there. So, anyway,
Facts.
yeah. So anyway, hey, well, Jeff, it's been fantastic. We had a great run. I hope you enjoyed the little bit deep dive into the crazy world of Reggie Wright and his. It's almost like there should be a television series about the misadventures of Reggie Wright or something.
Well, it was interesting insight because I had never, I mean, as balls deep as I am into this, I've never heard of that story, but it's interesting to establish again that pattern of behavior over the
Yeah,
course of many, many
yeah.
years.
Yeah, it's what you understand about a person that when you put them in another situation, you could say, "Well, I could see this happening
Right.
because look at this,"
Yep.
and and that's where I see that, and a lot of people think, "Oh, you're just being mean, or you're just not." No, there's tons of examples out there of choices that a person makes, and if they're consistently a run of bad choices, then you got to take a look at that. That has merit.
Right.
So, we will persist, my friend. But I
Without a
have
doubt.
to go because it is an evening with the family, and I'm going to go enjoy that. But let's invite everybody to watch Tupac Cover Up. It's on Tubi, Zumo, soon to be on Amazon. And it's just like, oh my God, Amazon, what an arm twist they are. They
Mhm.
actually, there was a clip in the Tupac Cover Up that had Frank Alexander plugging his book, back in 2009. Okay. And he was plugging his book, and Amazon rejected that episode, which is episode 6. They approved all the other ones, but they rejected episode 6 because they said there was somebody doing advertising in the video. And they said advertisements aren't allowed in our videos. Well, I see it all the time, so I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But it hasn't been on Amazon because I've had to send them, I had to edit out the sequence with Frank plugging his book. And of course, when you do that, then you have to edit the closed captions, you have to edit the sound, you have to, I mean, it's a mess. But that's done. That's over to Amazon. So we should be up on Amazon real soon. And I know everybody's looking forward to that.
We will keep everyone updated, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great, buddy. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And we will catch everybody on the next Tupac Assassination podcast. This again is RJ Bond, the director and producer of the Tupac Assassination series and the Tupac Cover Up docuseries, now available on Tubi and Zumo. Go check it out. Along with Jeff Wilson. Say goodbye, Jeff.
Peace and so much love. Take care, guys.